The Starside Prophecy by Tirri. Read by the author. Chapter 26. Ketamine. Lucero Fernandez Eduardo Aguado stood on the balcony of Suite 402, swirling the cognac he had ordered from room service. The balloon glass was cheap, but the XO superb. He cupped his hand around the bowl, warming the spirit, and then filling his nostrils with the delicate notes of pear and vanilla. The Count inspected his freshly circumcised cigar, which the idiot room service waiter had forgotten to bring the first time. He put the cigar between his teeth and lit the tip. Plumes of smoke soon swirled into the air, lingering, thinning, and then diminishing. A replica of life itself, he thought. The Count took another large gulp of cognac and pulled out a small container from his pocket. His aching liver was a constant reminder that he had been abusing alcohol since he was 9. The pain pills would help, but not for long. Opium would be better. The activity on the street below caught the Count's attention. He stepped through the French doors and onto the balcony. The peasants below, shopkeepers, porters and servants, were busy organising their wretched little lives like they actually meant something. The Count favoured the days when General Franco had ruled, the days before the resentful leftists started demolishing established traditions and noble families lost their privileges, relegated to a standard of living exactly like the commoners. The Count had not been able to find the bitch's luggage, which he thought was strange, but she was unpredictable. Intrigued but not deterred, he would grill her later regarding her origins. He was already certain of her destiny. The Count began to fantasize about the evening he had planned. In the distance he could see the shoreline of the Cape sprawling into the North Atlantic. A secluded jetty of stone rocks lay to the far left. The strong undercurrent there would suck her body under. It was unlikely to wash ashore because the sharks, opportunist hunters, his unwitting accomplices, always knew where to find their next meal. Along with the cognac, a bottle of Krug had been delivered to the room. The champagne was propped up in a silver ice bucket, uncorked, with a white napkin tied around the neck, the bitch's final drink. The Count poured some champagne into a flute, adding several drops of liquid ketamine. The strong, colourless sedative would work instantly. Through trial and error, he had mastered the correct dose based on body weight. The drug would have an instant hypnotic effect, and then he would be free to toy with the bitch without the commotion of too much resistance. He did not want her comatose, just manageable. The Count looked at his reflection in the mirror. He would have to be careful tonight. He was in a high-profile place rather than the usual brothel, a swanky hotel with eyewitnesses all around. He would suggest a walk and she would comply with the obedience of a well-trained dog. They would appear as lovers out strolling. The thought made him gag. Soft music, not classical as he would have preferred, but some modern abomination, was playing through the speakers built into the nightstand. The Count lay down on the bed and kicked off his shoes. As he continued puffing on his cigar, he could smell the bitch's perfume, which reminded him once again of his mother. The first question his mother would ask over tomorrow morning's coffee and eggs would be, "And how is my vicious son today?" Lorena opened her eyes, relieved to be back Starside, relieved to be in room 10 on the soft white settee that was so wonderfully familiar. She lay still, anticipating a disorientation that did not come. Maybe she wouldn't need to go to recovery. Gwendolen never bothered. Lorena was able to suppress the recent memory attempting to surface and reoriented her awareness back to the present moment. She then stood up and walked to the panel by the door. The timer said she had been gone for 42 minutes 22 seconds. 42 minutes? That felt like a lifetime. There was a knock on the door and an apprentice named Darren opened it and popped his head into the room. "Hey Lorena, just letting you know I'm here. You can go home now if you like, all good?" Yeah, all good, Darren. I'm just waiting for Gwendolen to get back. Thank you, I appreciate it." Lorena walked across the room and slid down the wall opposite the settee. She remained sitting on the floor, hoping that Gwendolen would return sooner rather than later. Darren closed the door and made his way back to the briefing room. He thought Lorena sounded a little bit off, but maybe she just wanted to talk to Gwendolen about something. Darren would have loved to have been Lorena's boyfriend, but she was Thaddeus's prize. There was something so ethereal and mysterious about her, all packaged in the sweetest girl-next-door nature. She was indeed an enigma. "Take your wife on a vacation," said Gwendolen in perfect Spanish, handing the taxi driver the last of her money as well as her watch. She opened the door and climbed out, closing the door behind her. She then blew the taxi driver a kiss through the window. The taxi driver didn't pull away immediately. He was speechless. He had never seen, let alone held, a 500 note, and the watch looked really expensive. He thought about the evening ahead. Tonight he could finish early, and as he admired the gold watch in his lap, he pulled into the slow-moving traffic. Luckily, his cousin's jewellery store was only a mile or two away. Gwendolen entered the hotel through the revolving doors and made her way through the lobby. After passing a huge tropical flower arrangement and a long check-in line, she turned towards the elevators. When one finally arrived, an elderly couple stepped out. Then Gwendolen entered, holding her finger on the door open button as several more people followed her in. She was the only person to get out on the 4th floor. The hallway carpet was navy blue, with a gold fleur-de-lis design embedded in every 12-foot stretch. As she neared her suite, Gwendolen could smell cigar smoke. The door was slightly ajar, and she could hear music coming from within, an instrumental she recognised, El Condor Pasa. As Gwendolen pushed the door open, a vacuum of air made the sheer curtains surrounding the French doors come alive in a flurry of dance. She quickly closed the door behind her, and the curtain settled back into position. The Count was lying on the bed. He had kicked off his shoes. Gwendolen noticed his yellow paisley socks, an accessory to match his ridiculous yellow shirt. "Glad to see you're comfortable," she said. The Count smiled at Gwendolen, but made no attempt to get up. "I am very comfortable, my dear, and I intend to stay that way. Why don't you relax next to me?" he said, patting the space beside him. Gwendolen jumped onto the bed, bouncing on her bottom like an exuberant teenager. She then lay back and put her head on the pillow as near to the Count's face as she could get. The Count didn't object to her childish enthusiasm or her horribly intrusive proximity, but instead he said, "Here, let us toast. The evening started off less desirably than I would have hoped, but I'm sure it will end wonderfully. Let's drink to that." The Count handed Gwendolen a champagne glass, the contents of which she promptly threw in his face. With a deft movement of a cat, she then straddled his chest while smashing the glass onto the nightstand. Gripping the stem, she pressed the broken glass into his carotid artery. "If you move, I will hurt you very badly, and that will hurt Mummy. We wouldn't want to hurt Mummy, would we?" Acting menacingly towards the predators allocated to her for extraction gave Gwendolen a kick. All were very nasty people who had earned the karma she dispensed. She was a very convincing actress, and so able to carry out her missions with dramatic flair, which separated her from the other dispensers. Upon return Starside, she occasionally apologised to those she had scared a little too thoroughly, but most deserved it, and most knew it. With her knees pressing firmly into the Count's sides, Gwendolen looked down at him. The champagne had stung his eyes, and when he tried to open them, his vision was blurry. He could feel a sliver of glass pushing into his neck. The Count was frightened, but his erection was growing. The bitch had already pierced his skin. He could feel the blood trickling onto the pillow. He had always liked the colour of blood, and the taste and the smell. He remained perfectly still, unsure what would happen next. As Gwendolen continued to straddle his chest, she brought her face closer to the Count's until they were only a few inches apart. "The last time we met, you treated me really badly. The Judas cradle hurt me, and you laughed as I screamed. You stretched my insides until I confessed, but you didn't stop, and you laughed as I screamed. You dislocated every joint in my body, and you laughed as I screamed. You mutilated my breast and you laughed as I screamed. I could hear you torture the others and you laughed as they screamed. The Count's vision was beginning to improve and he was able to see Gwendolyn's coal-black eyes. He did not know what she was talking about. Judas screaming, someone stretching. The bitch was staring into his eyes, daring him to move. The Count could feel the glass perilously close to his vein. He said nothing. Her tone of voice had unnerved him, and his erection quickly died, beads of perspiration forming on his forehead. His heart was racing, and his breathing was quick and shallow. You are a sadistic bastard, and you always have been. In this lifetime you have murdered 6 women and tortured countless others, and you have inflicted your filth upon those not strong enough to oppose you. But I am. You do understand that, don't you? The Count's thoughts began to race and pick up speed. How does she know any of this, let alone that the number stands at 6? Who is she? The police? An investigator? Has she been following me, spying on me? How much more does she know? The Count remained still, his head pressed into the bloody pillow. He saw a coldness in the bitch he had only ever seen previously in a mirror, and he felt his bowels loosen as fear racked through him. Gwendolyn's tone was now matter-of-fact. The Count lay still beneath her. Fear had disabled any attempt he might have made to get her off, and their eyes met for the last time. Listen carefully. This is what is going to happen to you. You will shortly die. You may elect how you die, because I am prepared to give you 2 choices. I am either going to slice your neck open, or you can go home in a more dignified manner. I can give you a capsule, and once it dissolves, which will happen instantly, your heart will cease beating. Your death will be quick and absolutely painless. If you choose this method of transportation, know that the hotel chambermaids will be more grateful. Another little plus to ingesting a pill is that when your mother is called to the coroner's office to identify you, you won't look in such bad shape. But either way, you will shortly find yourself back in a dimension of the universe that you won't immediately recognise. The only words of advice I have for you are head for the light, keep your focus on it, and it will draw you in. You'll be met by one of my colleagues and escorted to a place of peace. You have nothing to fear. Now, you choose. How do you wish to go? The Count knew with certainty, and for the first time since they had met, that he wasn't the only killer, the only one with a sick mind. The bitch had the strength of 3 men and the swiftness of a leopard and a deadly shard of glass in her right hand. The bitch was crazy, and he was certain that she knew how to end his life with the casualness of someone combing their hair. The fire in her eyes had turned to an icy coldness, and he knew she meant every word she said. She was the hunter, and he the hunted. It had never been the other way around. The Count did not know why she wanted him dead, but the words, revenge of the innocent, appeared in his mind. As the memory of a lifetime of degradation made its last call, the Count closed his eyes. The resignation that his life was over offered him an unexpected and gentle calm. A truce with his own existence swept over him, and all he could think now was the prospect of the immortality that waited. Since he was a small boy, his mother had told him every night before bed that he was destined to live forever, and, like the kings of his lineage, he would be reunited with his ancestors in the glory of the celestial world of purity that was his birthright. The Count wanted to die, wanted to be free from his own sickness, wanted a rest, and finally put an end to the nightmare that had been occurring daily since his birth. The Count made no attempt to resist, and keeping his eyes closed, he moved his chin to one side and offered Gwendolen the full length of his neck. Gwendolen knew he had made his choice, and the choice to bleed did not surprise her. She rammed the glass deep into his flesh, gouging the soft tissue as she made the sign of the cross with the tip. "Rest in peace, you sick fuck," she said without animosity. With her other hand, Gwendolen pushed another pillow over the Count's head, keeping it there until his life force withdrew. 24 seconds later, the soul of Viscount Lucero Fernandez, Eduardo Aguado, formerly Thomas de Torquemada, and all who had been before, left his jaundiced body. Gwendolen left the pillow over the Count's face and climbed off his corpse. The usual wave of pity washed over her. Another soul had projected his self-loathing onto others and was in for a very rough time. His karma would be very difficult to overcome. As she made her way to the bathroom, Gwendolen uttered these words. "Forgive us our trespasses, Lord, as we forgive those who trespass against us, as well as those who intended to trespass against us, but were not quick enough." The bathroom light came alive before she had a chance to flip the switch, and the faucets turned on. The music in the bedroom also changed from classical to gospel, and Gwendolen laughed. "Hi there," she said to Melchizedek as she walked towards one of the sinks. The godson might be Starside, but he was always present during Gwendolen's missions, just as he was for all his other dispensers. The bathroom was all white marble and garish gold fixtures. Gwendolen washed her hands in the sink and dried them on a small towel. She then opened a miniature bottle of lotion and squeezed some into the palm of her hand, rubbing it through her fingers and up and down her forearm before walking back into the bedroom. She took one last look at the Count, who was no longer in possession of a soul. The murder inquiry would start off frenetically, but the manhunt for the mysterious blonde would be fruitless, and the mystery of the Count's death would eventually take on its own mythology. Earth's cold case history would be recorded, but the keeper's Starside would log the truth. Gwendolen picked up her clutch and put it under her arm. Standing perfectly still with her eyes closed, she took in a slow, deep breath and began flushing her mind of thoughts. It wouldn't be long before she would be back in her grotto, wrapped in the muscular arms of a boyfriend who would ask no questions and make no demands. She then visualised her destination, and with the honed awareness of someone well practised at transference, she left the physical just as quickly as she had entered it. The Marchesa was shuffling her tarot deck, irritated that her servant had walked in with a tray of sandwiches when she had explicitly asked to be left alone. Tonight the Marchesa felt a powerful message beckoning her, and she had spent the last hour just feeling the cards. After one more shuffle, she pulled a card from the rear of the deck and turned it over. A hooded man holding a scythe, card number 13, the card of death. The agonising cry of a mother whose intuition was seldom wrong echoed throughout the room. The Marchesa waited that night, stiff and numb, hoping in the darkness that her son would return home. She knew he wouldn't. The following morning, the murder of Viscount Lucero Fernandez Eduardo Aguado became the talk of Vida Pontevedra. A midday news flash reported the unexpected loss of the Count, dead at the age of 33, a sad ending to the venerable life of a nobleman, the firstborn to one of Spain's oldest families. The following Thursday, the funeral procession would take the Count's body to the Pantheon where his ancestors awaited. His grieving mother would wail while her son's coffin would be shut away forever. The Marchesa would dress in black for the rest of her life, and her son's father would feign grief for the rest of his. Lorena sat on the floor in a one-man hug waiting for Gwendolen to return. Lorena knew that Gwendolen would never spend longer away than was absolutely necessary, and who could blame her? Planet Earth looked beautiful, but that was deceiving. Lorena again tried to discern the motive behind her ill-fated trip, boredom, impulse, but knew the choice was immature and irresponsible. She had been to Earth as an apprentice many times before, setting the stage for Gwendolen to carry out her duties, but her trips were always brief and to the point. Images of Vida Pontevedra came into her mind's eye. The Rottweiler, the taxi driver, the Romanian, the old woman whose beads were still around her neck, her wrinkles and her hunchback and her broken dreams. Lorena was lost in reverie when Gwendolen materialised on the settee. The dispenser, with just another ordinary mission behind her, looked right as rain. Gwendolen opened her eyes and smiled at her apprentice, whom she had guessed would be waiting. Gwendolen did not feel any disorientation and swung her feet to the floor. She looked over at the clock. 112 minutes. That took longer than I'd hoped, she thought. Gwendolen's hair was a little awry and the polish on one of her toes was chipped, but apart from that she looked like she was headed off to a cocktail party. Lorena said through a sheepish grin, "Welcome back, Gwen. You're amazing. Thank you. I don't know what else to say other than thank you." "You're welcome," said Gwendolen as she smiled and bent down to remove her heels. She then straightened up and said to her apprentice, "Come with me, you naughty girl." Lorena bit her lip. She was still embarrassed at having put the dispenser in such a compromising position and wanted to make it up to her. She would bake her some brownies tomorrow. Gwendolen loved chocolate. Holding her shoes by the straps and with her clutch under her arm, Gwendolen left the room barefoot and Lorena followed. Senior dispensers were encouraged to enter recovery after their missions, but all Gwendolen ever wanted to do after her missions was get home. But tonight Gwendolen wanted to make sure Lorena was okay before leaving. The recovery room, reserved exclusively for Gwendolen, had soft jazz playing as they entered, and the lights were dim to the programme setting. The decor, creams and beiges and soft pile carpet, as well as the room's amenities, were all one would expect of a space created to be soothing and restorative. Gwendolen walked towards the crescenda and poured some red wine into 2 glasses. She handed one to her apprentice and then sat down in a recliner, extending it to the fully prone position, and beckoned Lorena to sit opposite. Gwendolen wiggled her toes and stretched her neck, finally relaxing her focus and bringing her awareness back to its everyday norm. "Cheers," said Gwendolen, holding her glass mid-air. "Cheers," said Lorena, "and thank you again." Both women took small sips of wine as peaceful and appreciative thoughts encouraged by the Beaujolais filled their consciousness. 10 minutes passed. Then Gwendolen put her empty glass on the table next to her chair, removed the bobby pins from her hair and ran her hands through her blonde wavy mane, kneading her scalp in small circular movements with her fingertips. "Gwen, before you say anything," said Lorena, "I promise you I will never do that again. Never. No one knows." Gwendolen looked at Lorena and smiled. "Are you all right? Be honest. That was a rough environment, and you were there with no anti-force to acclimatise you to it." "Yeah, I'm fine, Gwen." "How can you stand it there? I was freaking out. If you hadn't have come along, I don't know what would have happened." "I do," said Gwendolen. "You wouldn't be here now, that's for sure. You'd be on your way to some nasty little room where you would be drugged and forced to act in ways that would make you wish you were dead." Lorena swallowed. "Lorena, everyone incarnating on that planet has to operate from a reduced consciousness. It's the only way they can function. You went in fully actualised, and that's not good if you're not equipped to repel the low vibration. A lot of Earth is dense and dark and full of lingering and base emotions. You were fortunate to get out in one piece. You do know that, don't you?" "Yes, Gwen, I do." "Good. Anyway, no harm, no foul," said Gwendolen, smiling. "We live to learn, right?" "Right," said Lorena, nodding. "You're amazing. You should go home now and get some rest. You deserve it." "Who needs rest?" "Anyway, don't tell anyone, baby, but I'm going to use the speedy route home. The night is still young." "Your secret's safe with me, Gwen. Night-night." Gwendolen looked at Lorena one last time. Her aura was stable. She would be fine. She blew her apprentice a kiss before disappearing. All that remained in the recliner was a couple of bobby pins, a little black dress, a clutch and a pair of stilettos. Gwendolen materialised next to her boyfriend, who was standing in the kitchen with a towel around his waist and dipping strawberries into melted white chocolate. "Welcome home, my love. Your bath is waiting." Lorena picked up the dress and the rest of Gwendolen's garb. She would return them to Jeannie before leaving. Lorena put Gwendolen's recliner in the upright position, washed their wine glasses, and then, as an afterthought, walked over to the potted fig next to the window. Lorena lifted the beads over her head and hung them on an eye-level branch. She then moved the plant in front of the window, as if showering it in moonbeams somehow honoured the old woman who had bestowed those beads upon her. What Lorena didn't know was that the Spanish pedlar